Welcome back to GaleForceWins Season 3.
The GaleForceWins podcast is proudly sponsored by Newfound Marketing, a digital marketing agency located in St. John's, Newfoundland. Visit our website at newfoundmarketing.ca to find out how we can help your business grow. Newfound Marketing, a complement to your marketing team.
Are you happy with your hair like that?
No.
And welcome to another edition of GaleForceWins. I got to tell you, there's optimism everywhere in Newfoundland and Labrador, and we are certainly happy to be a part of just amplifying people's stories so that our broader audience can walk away feeling good about themselves and maybe take some positive steps as well in their lives. I'm Alan Dale. With me, as always, my good buddy Jerry Crew. How are you, Jerry?
Well, you know, I always tell you I'm excited, but I've been telling you about Anne. I don't know Anne, but I saw you speak at a Board of Trade luncheon or something, and I came away from there pumped. How much have I been telling you how excited I am about this?
Yep, 100%.
I even told you to change your clothing because, you had a hoodie on. Can't do that, right?
I was going for like street casual. Yeah. I had a hoodie, and Jerry said, no, you don't need a hoodie. I thought it would have been okay. But anyway, enough about...
It would have been okay.
Well, you know,
100%.
We're authentic here, and just had to bring that up. No, I'm excited. Can you tell?
I'm excited.
We just want to dig into your journey. Take it away, Alan.
Yeah, so Anne, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Well, I'm Anne Whelan. That's the name I was born with. And I had another one in the middle there for a little while. But,
did you?
Yeah, I did.
You going to tell us?
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and I was born in Jersey Side. Well, I was born in Placentia, Newfoundland. But if you're from that area, you very clearly define who's from Placentia and who's from Jersey Side and all that. So I'm from Jersey Side. For any of your viewers, and you've been to the Placentia area, it's just before you cross the bridge.
Okay.
So that's the Jersey side half, and the other half was called town side. Anyway, I grew up there, and, you know, I often say I spent the first 20 years of my life trying to figure out how to get out of there,
right.
And I spent the rest of my life trying to figure out how to get back there,
okay.
You know, in lots of ways. So in retrospect, I had a wonderful childhood.
Yeah.
You know, growing up in rural Newfoundland, there's things you miss out on for sure. And I see that sometimes in the business environment, things I didn't learn or didn't know. But what you do learn is community and resilience and family and friendships. And, you know, I had a good education. Mind you, I remember going to Memorial and doing a chemistry course, and I wasn't even sure how to light the Bunsen burner.
Right.
And I was with, you know, people from Holy Heart and Brother Rice and all that who could, you know, run the chemistry lab. And so I felt like a bit of a fish out of water sometimes there. But, you know, my family was a close family. I have two sisters, and we're all a year apart. And then I have a brother who's 14 years younger, so
okay.
we, you know, he's
Wow.
almost his own
Yeah,
little
yeah.
thing, you know. You know, I have great memories of learning that whole thing about resilience and social justice even, and things like that we learned in school and that we carried out into the community. And I actually worked for the Telegram as a correspondent in grade 12 for the Placentia area. Yeah, and you know, so I wrote stories about amalgamation and things like that. But then that plane crash occurred in Gander. I don't know, you know, it would have been
1985.
85, yeah. And so I had to interview the commander of the base in Argentia that day as it was happening because they couldn't get a reporter out fast enough and phone in my article. And yeah, and I got a journalism scholarship because of that,
Wow.
which I didn't take because it wasn't a full scholarship, and my parents didn't want me to move to Ottawa and go to Carleton. And in the scorekeeping, I keep score on that one. But anyway, but you know, so I went to Memorial, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. You know, I thought I was going to do engineering. I got in the engineering faculty. So the first year I did all that chemistry and physics and all that stuff. And there weren't very many women there. I think in that entering class of 200, there was 8 or 10,
Right.
and I didn't like it. And so I didn't even stay for the first semester. I transferred out after a couple of weeks and did an an English degree, which is the exact opposite of engineering, really, I guess. But, you know, I think perhaps looking back on it now, it was my interest in industry, even though I didn't really know that then because I didn't see that in the small town necessarily. So it's hard to explain, but I think it was overall I was interested in how things work. And so, you know, whether that's from a writing and language, and, you know, I ended up in community economic development, which where all that proposal writing made sense. But the engineering was like, I love the idea of industry that's possible. And so it's been a long way around, but I kind of landed in a place where both sides of that brain are kind of working. And so I, after university, it was a tough time. I had a job, but I moved back out to Placentia to work in community economic development. And it was right after the tags crisis hit. And it wasn't a very good place for a young person. And, you know, when I think about the 100-odd people I graduated high school with, about 7 or 8 years ago, I started counting on my fingers, and I didn't get to the fingers and toes before I was out of people who lived in Newfoundland, you know? So it was, you know, that was a tough time. And it was sad to be there. And, you know, in 1992, Placentia was the second fastest shrinking town in Canada. And so, you know, I loved that work. I loved community economic development work, but I felt like I needed to go find life. So that's how I ended up with the different last name for a while. I got married to a U.S. serviceman, moved to California, which, you know, sounded like a good idea at the time. And my daughter was born in California, so it was good. I mean, there was good outcomes from it. That relationship did not work out, but so you know, there I was back in Placentia again. And from there, I decided, okay, I gotta get a real job now. I need, you know, so I went back to school and did my MBA at Memorial, and I thought I was going to go to work in industry at Inco, which was all the rage down there then. And then while I was doing the MBA program, the price fell out of the nickel market, and Inco didn't do anything for 5 or 6 years. And so, you know, here I was, okay, now what? And so I had a couple of offers, and at this point I had a small child that I was raising by myself. And my mom had started this home care agency. She used to be an instructor in the community college area in that space, and she was ready to move on and do something else. And so I took it over, and it was quite small at that point. And I said, okay, now Ann, you better get out your MBA toolkit and see what you can do with this. And so, you know, a couple of years later, I bought out the business, and here we are.
You're still in your 20s at this point when you did that?
30. Yeah.
30.
30,
Still
31.
Very young to take on that.
Well, I had a daughter when I was 24, so, you know, that's a different, like, people don't do that now as much, but it was a different pace at that point, I guess.
You had a lot of plate spinning in your
I had a lot going on there.
to buy the business for sure.
Yeah.
So you bought Mom's business, and
yes.
and then how did that all unfold? So where did you go then?
Well, I did a few other things in between there. You know, I worked at the Murphy Center for a while I was doing my MBA, and you know, I realized pretty early on that, you know, there were needs in the community care sector that weren't in the narrow lane that they called home care. And quite frankly, home care was pretty cut and dried. This is the way it is. There wasn't a lot of room to do anything differently there.
This is home care going into someone's home, not your own home?
No, no homes, no real estate.
And you still don't have that?
No.
Okay.
No. But it's, so it's looking after people in their homes. But we then got asked, as did a number of home care agencies, if you recall the time, to look after children who were in protective care. And at one point had social workers staffing them in hotel rooms. And that was part of the Newfoundland story in the early 2000s, I guess, you know, 2003, 4, 5, that kind of time. So we got involved in doing some of that work, and I realized that we needed to know it. It's not just about showing up and looking after somebody. So I reached out to people who ran this program for children in residential care at a Cornell University who worked with organizations to develop their capacity. And I think this is one of the boldest things I ever did in my life. And even though we did not have a government contract to do it, I signed a 2-year contract with Cornell in US dollars, which killed me, to say, teach us how to do this. And it was a humbling learning experience for us. But from that, we grew into the largest provider for children's services in Newfoundland and Labrador. There are a couple of others now because they've changed the space up a little bit. But at that time, we certainly were. And really, the first one that had a public oversight but a private delivery model, which is a bit of a hybrid space.
Right.
And touched a lot of lives that way. And so from there, we've grown into other things, and some have worked and some haven't. And I think it's, the two sides of the brain there happen from time to time, all of this sort of community work and all of this stuff, which is really how I'm wired. But I get really excited about industry and tech and all that stuff as well. And so, as the business has progressed and matured, and there are people who know more than me leading those organizations that provide the direct care, I have, moved into how can we invest in innovation and growth to help these and other community care kind of organizations do better. So in this building, there's some software development happening to help plan better self-managed care in the home care space. We're also doing some work around how to make hospital discharge planning smoother and less likely for people to need to return because things are not working out. And so we're in dialogue with a couple of provinces around all of that. So lots of exciting things happening. And, what I'll say is, getting back to your initial question, which is about, who am I and how did I grow up and all that, I really would have to say that the best lessons I've ever learned, I learned a lot at Memorial and at other, courses and programs. And, I've ended up doing some corporate board work and that kind of thing. But I had some fantastic kitchen table lessons from my parents, from their friends. Our kitchen table, we were like probably the last generation that listened over the vent, and the wood stove and all that stuff. And I remember, my dad and one of his friends, Nick Kareen, who was later an MHA for the area, and another guy who was, the mayor of Jersey Side, and they would get together and have cups of tea, and they weren't drinkers, any of them really, so they would have, tea and toast in the night, and the politics of the day were discussed.
Were you at the table? Were you lingering? Where were you at this point?
So sometimes we would be listening, kind of around in the kitchen, but if we made ourselves visible at all, we drove upstairs, and so then we would listen, at the grate. And the conversation was different when we were there and not there. So there'd be a few swear words when we weren't there, and there would be a little more pointed, conversations about what the mayor of this town was doing versus that town, and but I remember learning lessons like. The hunger strikers in Ireland, and asking my father what that was all about. And I remember the morning the Ocean Ranger sank, and we all stayed home from school to listen to that radio. And, and what that meant for Newfoundland. I remember I knew a girl who I'd gone to school with. They'd moved because her dad got a job on the Ocean Ranger. And I knew, I didn't expect to be sad about that, but it's the anniversary next week. And... so those lessons about what's important and family and growth and loss and all of that, it was really, really special. And, I think when you look at all the things that kids have today and internet, and they know what's happening in the whole rest of the world, like on TikTok, they're all together. We didn't have that. Like going to St. John's was a big deal, right? So
we had an encyclopedia.
Yeah,
my kids don't even know what that is.
Right, it's Wikipedia but with books, right? So, but all of that, when I think about it now, and I have a couple of friends who, we connect on that, and all of whom done very well for themselves, and we say the lessons we learned there about, how to show up and
It is amazing, right? Because you were listening into nuanced conversations, right? And it wasn't sound bites from Wikipedia, like TikToks and things, you were getting true conversations and seeing the impact. What did Dad do? What was Dad involved in?
So my dad was a tradesperson first, so he went to work on the base in Argentia, and he ended up as director of public works there. And then when the community college system opened up, he went back to university at the age of 40 or so and did a voc ed diploma and then degree. So he was the vice principal of the community college in Placentia. And
We're good.
okay. And and he was also the mayor for a while, and the chair of the Area Development Association.
Right.
So one of those people, and my mom too, who
Right.
leaned into being part of the community.
Right.
So.
And your sisters and the really, really younger brother, what were they up to?
Okay, so.
Because I'm a really younger brother too.
Are you?
With
Yeah.
4 older sisters.
Oh, well, you get it then, yeah. A little bit spoiled, maybe?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I had a wonderful upbringing. Just
Excellent.
Like you.
We need a whole podcast.
You need
just
a whole
about
issue.
that.
And if
We're
you
not
got
getting
my
into it.
brother, you could do a whole series on that one, I think. So anyway, so all 4 of us are very close.
Right.
And we weren't always because of that space, but
Yeah.
now we are. And my oldest sister used to be a teacher and then a principal and then worked at the school board. And when she turned 50, she said, yeah, okay, I'm going back. And she did her PhD
Wow.
in leadership. And so I'm doing what I'm doing. My sister Jane actually works with our group of companies, and she really led up our pandemic response services that we started.
Wow. She was busy.
So, yeah, she was
So
very
you
busy.
all were, I'm sure.
Yeah. So my brother John worked with us for a while. He's a lawyer, and he ran some of that Blue Sky, which is the Children's Protective Care group, for a while. And a couple of years ago, he left to form his own dispute resolution company, which he does, and is the parent of 2 small kids. And so everybody's here in Newfoundland, which is a little unusual, and everybody is doing well and, continuing to learn and grow. And we learned that too. My mom went back to school after the baby, and she did her master's and then her doctorate in adult learning and education.
Your mom.
My mom.
Wow.
Your mom's still, dad's still alive?
No, my dad passed away quite a while. He died young. He just turned 70.
Yep.
My mom is still alive, still working. She works on accrediting healthcare organizations, like travels to nursing homes in, other parts of Canada and works on their accreditation
Is that
process.
right?
Oh, yes, she does.
Wow.
So, got some good genes there.
Well, I was going to say, the
Yeah.
whole thing sounds, and everybody's here thriving,
Yeah.
doing well, and I can't help but think it's because of those kitchen table conversations and that foundation that was provided. Jerry and I just spent a full day out in Argentia, Placentia area, and there is a real community spirit there.
Yeah.
People are very proud of where they come from, and there's a lot of good things happening out there in the moment. We'll talk about that in a moment. One thing that you made mention of early on, there's 2 topics I really want to kind of explore a little bit. You mentioned the word resiliency a lot at the beginning, and that's a topic I'd like to dive a little deeper on. And then the other one is, you said, touching people's lives. And I imagine you have some amazing stories about that and how that keeps you and your team motivated to move forward. So let's talk about resiliency first. What does that mean to you? Like, that word flew off your tongue 3 or 4 times in a row.
Well, it's one of our core values at Seafair. So, the group of companies I lead is all under that Seafair umbrella. And, I'll tell you where I really learned it. When you talk about children and youth in care, it's easy to say, disadvantaged or, focus on the negative that has occurred for them in their lives. And yet, these are the most resilient children you will ever meet. They can thrive in somewhat adverse circumstances. And, I've had to do that. I kind of gave you the bright side up, version of it, but lots of challenges in being, a young mother and divorced and trying to go back to school and all that. And, and being in a community that was big and then, like all of that is very challenging. But Newfoundlanders have a history, and Labradorians have a history of thriving in adverse circumstances. I think the weather actually makes us naturally...
He gets mad at me for bringing up the weather.
Okay.
I found a like-minded weather personality.
Yeah, well, you did. Because,
You're right, though, Anne.
Yeah, well, you've been now to Placentia, and you know where that bridge is.
Yep. Yes.
So when the weather comes in there, it comes in all forms, often on the same day, right? And so, you have to be ready to adjust to anything.
There's some tide coming in there, too.
Absolutely.
Holy crap.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so, that's what I stepped out to when I went to school every morning. And so, it makes you, it toughens you up a little bit.
Yeah.
And not tough in a hard way, but you take what comes and you make the best of it. And, that was certainly a kitchen table lesson. This is where we're at and this is what we got to do. And, in the spaces where we started operating the business and looking after people, and you meet people when you're in a bit of a hard spot. If you need home care, things are not ideal.
Yeah.
And the same thing in child protection and all that. And so, you can either get sucked into what's going wrong or you can find the strength in that. And so, resiliency for us means, planning. It means having a strong base and a set of core values that allows you to be able to respond to changes in the weather, metaphorically speaking.
Yeah.
And, we've had to do that a fair bit. And I think, many businesses in Newfoundland do. It's just the, cyclical nature of particularly service businesses and that kind of thing. It can be tough. And, you mentioned the Board of Trade. I remember that because it was right when the bottom fell out of the price of oil, and they said, we want you to come and talk about what you're doing in your business to try to respond to all of this. And so I remember I spent a lot of time working on what I was going to say that day because I had to get it right in my own head too. So I do remember that, and remembering about what sustains you when things are not going well. It's easy enough to go along when things are going well. What sustains you? And it is that resiliency is tied to the belief that there is better, and better is possible. And you can call that a little naive, but I'd like to call it positive. I think you guys are nodding to that one because that's what you're doing with GaleForceWins. And GaleForceWins doesn't say sunny days. Right? It says,
it doesn't.
Right.
Yep.
And so it is really about,
it
really, GaleForceWins is an excellent phrase for resiliency.
Right.
I think it's important what you're saying because, you've come to a place that is an amazing place. If everyone out there thinks that just happened by chance and here you are and Whelan is a huge success, it's really important to share some of those challenges, isn't it? It's through adversity, and that's what I try to tell my kids.
Yeah.
When you're down, that's when you analyze yourself. If you look in the mirror and everything's rosy, well, things are going good, I don't need to change, right?
But let me tell you, things are not rosy. This is a tough time in business for us right now.
Yeah.
It is a tough time. The pandemic was very, very difficult. I had businesses that closed. I had healthcare services to deliver in very trying circumstances, with contractual obligations to do so. And, nobody showed up with a bucket of money to help us out, really, So it has been extremely trying. But that's the magic, right, is that we were able to withstand all of that because we had a strong set of values. We were prepared, we were ready, we were, tough enough to, could we do it forever? No. But living through adversity isn't just about being willing to, take a few smacks.
Yeah.
It's about training to be ready because you're going to take a few smacks, right? It's about having a level of foresight and preparedness and all that stuff. That's what makes you resilient, right?
It's amazing, though. The pandemic shook a lot of us to the core. You've got a significant payroll. I mean, I can't imagine what it must have been like to get up in the morning and know that you have all these lives and these people Tell us a little bit about that.
It was a caterpillar butterfly moment. How about that?
Okay.
So I sit on the board of the Bank of Canada. And so early March, we were actually interviewing for the new governor. And that was in and of itself an intimidating job to go do. And of course, this was when, maybe it was late February, kind of around there, you know, it became apparent that COVID was coming at us.
Yeah.
But it wasn't, like people here were not in that headspace at all. Everything was going on business as usual. And so they had a briefing for us after the interviews, and they had security outside the door and everything. And I was like, ooh, this is serious. And we had a briefing on monetary policy and extraordinary measures, and all that stuff scared me to death. And I got home, and next morning I called the VP of the Bank of Montreal, which is where we bank. I said, now, we need to have a conversation about if government shuts down and all these things shut down and I still have to look after people, or I'm going to shut down, we need to extend some credit here, and I got to get this in place, boom, 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 boom. And then I called all my business colleagues and said, go do this if you can, right? So we were getting ready then, and we had just sold our house, and the house sale fell through, and we were building another one. The cost of that doubled, you know, as you can imagine. Oh my God.
Yeah.
And then all the businesses, and no masks. People, you know, and I got to tell you, I went from being scared to being calm. And how I did it was I said, okay, if this is the end of the world, Anne, what do you want to do? Yeah. And I actually remember having that conversation with myself. And I said,
it felt like it, didn't it?
It did. The first few weeks of that, it felt like the end of the world. And I said, right, I'm going home. And I went out. We have a weekend spot we bought in Placentia. So that's where I'm going. And so my husband and I packed up the house and went out there. My daughter was out there too, so that made sense. And I said, now I got to worry about all these seniors who are home and all these kids in care. Like, they can't go home.
Right.
We are their home, you know? And so I got to find a way to allow these home support workers to be able to go to work. And I remember talking to a woman in Placentia, Sandra Power, who's Wayne Power's mom, actually. And said, Sandra, I went to Walmart, I bought every bed sheet they had. I said, any chance you can get the quilting group to make me some masks? Within 2 days, they had 500 masks sewn for me that I could give out to home support workers.
500 in 2 days?
Yeah. She put it out to the whole quilting group, and she said, no charge for that. And anyway, they sewed them for me, and we did something afterwards.
Right.
But like, and I said, okay, so if this is it, Anne, how's this going to unfold? Well, we're going to look after people. We're all in this together. And so that was my first thought, and my executive team was fantastic. We had a daily meeting. We went through step after step of what do we do next and how do we respond to this, and the fantastic stories of people who, we ended up with one adult client with developmental disabilities who got COVID. And this was when everybody was petrified. And we had staff, most of whom were new Canadians in this particular home, who said, I've been exposed already, so if I have it, I'll stay here. And can you get me some PPE? And just for days on end and things like that, just hero stories, you know? And so that made me calm, because I thought, the universe is still a good place. And then I would lie awake at night and think, okay, so what else do I know how to do? If we do survive all this and this all falls to nothing, what else do I know how to do?
Right.
So then I got doing some other things, and it actually, over the course, when we got more used to the pandemic, fostered the biggest period of innovation and change that we have ever had, and really refueled me to do some other things, like that software stuff that we're talking about and all that. I was like, what have I learned? And my team learned through our years of service delivery and through surviving this pandemic about how we can do things better. And it's driven some fantastic change. So,
well, I mean,
that's amazing.
A fantastic kind of segue into to what you're doing in the moment and what that's all about. A great way to come out of a pandemic, innovative thinking, pivoting and moving in different directions. But I will say this, that you're the first guest that we've ever had on board that just so casually thrown out, oh, I'm on the board of the Bank of Canada, and then went on with your next story. So that's fantastic.
Well,
so tell us what you're doing in the moment.
Okay, so Seafair is doing tons of interesting things. So the service delivery businesses that we operate are in home care, support for adults with intellectual disabilities. We have another group that supports children in protective care. We've started Parallel Health, which is does two things. It operates clinics, so we have a couple of nurse practitioner clinics now that we operate that are fee-for-service based, meant to run in parallel with and not really compete with the healthcare system, but just provide some slack where that's needed.
Take a little load, yeah.
Yeah, and we're doing some work with large employers for them to have, more healthcare delivery on site when that's needed. So some areas of the occupational health and safety space, like we're doing some work in Argentia, for example, and we're hoping to do some more. We're in dialogue with some of those companies, and we have an office in Placentia, and we're doing medicals and things like that. So, and we have another group called Aurelia, which works with Indigenous populations, mostly in their child protection, but moving more into their overall health delivery services as well. So we're not so much a direct service provider there as we are a capacity builder. We've helped, for example, in Sheshatshiu to get their group home, helped the Innu in Sheshatshiu get their group home to meet provincial standards and to be operated with Innu staff. Right. Because it's so important to have, role models that look like you and understand your culture and do all those things, so that's kind of in the health services delivery space. We have a business called Headway, and we have a home care agency in Florida, which was really, dramatically challenged by the pandemic and then the hurricane, because it's in Naples, which is right where that hit, just as we were getting over.
Holy crap.
Yeah, really. Yeah. Resilience.
Resilience.
Yes, sir.
Did you buy that down there or start it?
Started it.
Wow.
Yeah,
from scratch.
From scratch. In retrospect, it might not have been the best idea, but who could predict the weather? And right? So, but it's doing well now. It's, it's picking up steam now. So we have Headway, which is really engaged in the procurement and distribution of PPE and related services that we really stood up during the pandemic. And that was a competitive bid process, and we were actually successful because we know this field so well, because we know how to deliver service out all over nooks and crannies in Newfoundland and stuff, and because we know the particular strengths and challenges of the public health system and how to get information back and forth there and all that. So, that is changing into something new now, and we're because of course the pandemic requirements are waning. So we're working with our internal group to say, now that we know this, what else can we do? And there's some really exciting things.
Is that a new business started in the pandemic?
It is,
Wow.
yeah.
2 businesses started in the pandemic. Naples and here?
No, Naples was before that, but it was not long. It was, a year before the pandemic, and those things take a couple of years to build. And so then we have, out on the other side of this room, what we call the DOC, which is a formal innovation hub that our executive team all did the Oxford Innovation Program. Some ice being made here. The Oxford Innovation Program during the pandemic, because we said we might have to be something totally different. And so people, we've started this innovation arm, and so when we see one of these good ideas living somewhere, people say, this really could be better if we just did this. So now we're starting to do it. And one example.
All healthcare related? Or?
No. Actually, one of them is called Keen, and it's about small business bookkeeping and payroll and financial reporting.
I think I've heard of that one.
Keen is just taking off because I know when you don't have your numbers and they're not, and I'm not an accountant, I need to not just have a set of numbers to file to CRA, I need to understand them. And I need for someone to say to me, wait now, your AR is way too high or whatever. You need to, here's some things you should change. Like that kind of advisory piece. And so we've been doing that. And we are growing really, but the vision for that is to really scale that to be something that uses AI and machine learning to automate lots of business intelligence that we can then give back to, small and medium businesses.
So, so it's a privately run incubator?
Yeah, it is a privately run incubator called the Doc.
Okay, so healthcare, privately run incubator, a lot of healthcare streams there.
Yeah.
Anything else we should know about?
Well, I own the Three Sisters in Placentia, which is a
I got a great picture there yesterday.
So you're a restaurateur as well?
Yes.
And is that in collaboration with your sisters?
No, actually, my one sister did work there for a while, but it was named after, well, obviously, because there are three sisters.
Right, of course.
But, and we had a hamburger named after my brother. Okay. He didn't make the building, but he made the menu anyway.
Young fella, is that what it's called?
Yeah, it's called the Little John, because my dad was Big John.
Oh,
and so we had a Big John and a Little John for a while.
Try the Little John.
Yeah, but it was named after the three rivers in Ireland that converged in County Waterford, where all of it, so they call those rivers the Three Sisters.
Okay.
And then there was three of us, so it's meant to be a bit of a double, so I would call that a labor of love. Seasonal restaurant is really what it is, but I loved that building. I didn't want to see it go. I just was like, this has to be here.
Well, that's where your roots are, right?
Yeah.
So that's I can understand that. So I asked you previously, and we went down the resiliency road. But the second part of my question was, you've really positively touched people, and now I've come to realize must be thousands of people that you've touched in a very positive way. How does that feel? How does that make you feel when you go home at night, knowing that that is your core business, to positively make people's lives better?
I have to remind myself of that from time to time when business side of things doesn't go well, but I think it's pretty philosophical, but I am a business success in the sense that we're true to mission and we've managed to stay the course for a long time. I think if a purely financial person were to look at what I do and what I've done, they would maybe have a different opinion. I'm happy with where I am, and to be 55 years old and be able to say that, that's pretty nice.
All right.
And I have loved the work that I do. I have loved knowing that, public service doesn't mean you have to be a public servant, right? Not that there's anything wrong with that, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that there's many ways that people can show up and help others, and business, I believe, does that a lot in helping people have good lives and helping people thrive in lots of ways. And I have always described the core work that we've done as we have gone where angels fear to tread. Sometimes it's the tough stuff, right? Like child protection is hard, and it's hard on your heart when you do it for a long time. And home care, most of your clients are on a progression there that is celestial graduation eventually, right? Like that's how people put it. But I guess it's a period, it's a lifetime of self-discovery to realize that is what is important to me. That is what I care about.
Right.
And I'm on the board of the Gathering Place, and right now later today, we're going to have a meeting where we're ready to launch the build of a new shelter. And when you see the need that's out there in the community, my sense of, and this is back to kitchen table stuff, my sense of justice is that how can you not try to look after people and look out for them? So, I guess that's who I showed up in the world as. I feel like, some of the biggest thing, I'm not as directly involved with the clients that we have anymore in the way that I used to be when the business was smaller and I knew them all by name and, and the kids in care, I would go visit them all with Christmas gifts and stuff. It got too big for all that. But, what I try to take on as personal challenges now for looking after people is trying to do the right thing all the time. Like, I am very proud of the fact that our executive team is diverse in every way. There's 6 people on the executive. There's 2 women, there's 2 white men, and there's 2 men who are persons of color. Mm-hmm. And you know, that is the right proportion for our population, and you don't see that very often. And it wasn't an accident either. It was very deliberate to say, let's be the changes that we're asking for in the world. And I know that's pretty, you know, that's a 20, maybe I'm naive, and that's a university notion of be the change you want to see in the world. But
nothing naive about that.
No,
Yeah.
It's and I'm not a saint either. I mean, I think saints would be very annoying people if they were perfect all the time. So I screw lots of stuff up. I say the wrong thing all the time. Yeah. I piss people off, you know, I all that. And so, you know, and I wouldn't want people, you know, who are part of this conversation to think that that is, you know, an aspiration that requires a really special kind of person. Yeah. It requires you to be true to who you are. Yeah. Is really it, you know?
Yeah, you bring up a question. Given what you just said, it's wonderful. We've talked a good bit about imposter syndrome. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about, like, has that ever entered your head?
Every day of my life.
It's such an incredible business you've built. I think about that 30-year-old.
It's a great question, Jerry.
It is, because you don't exude any of that here right now. But I think there's, especially young ladies, you know, my mom was a single mother. Yeah. She needed to hear stuff. What? Not to drag you too deep into it, but we have the whole internet, as Alan likes to say.
Yeah, that's right. Well, thank you for that question, because people don't talk about that very much. And I would say it's probably the biggest struggle of my life.
Interesting.
Yep. I would say it is. It wakes me up at 3 o'clock in the morning, still, to this day.
Really?
And and you know, there's times when it's overwhelming. So the day that I grabbed that great big handle of the door of the Bank of Canada, and I got a call to say, would you like to serve on the board of Bank of Canada? And I was
Jersey
like,
side girl going into the Bank of Canada door.
Yeah, and I felt like, you know, oh my God, like, do I even know enough economics to do this? And, you know, so I was reading, like, you know, economics textbooks and stuff, trying to, you know, get myself ready to not embarrass myself, you know. And then, wow, I mean, we weren't expecting quantitative easing. Canada's never done it before. And, you know, and then, you know, stuff happens, right? And you end up in places where you're like, you're out of bound. You're elastic as humans, and you get there. And one of the things I'll go back to my high school education. I went to school in part to the sisters. Both Presentation and Mercy sisters were out there, and so they worked together there. And I remember getting this little poster to put on your wall one time, and it said, go as far as you can see, and when you get there, you'll be able to see further. And I've always, you know, that's defined the ambition in me, and the desire to do better and all of those things. But when you press up against your outer bound, which will move as you get better, you also, imposter syndrome shows up every single time. And what I would say about that is, it's real, and women in particular, and the data shows that women in particular struggle with that. And I always go back to that message of, you know, go as far as you can see, and then, you know, it becomes, so where I thought I wasn't competent before, it's moved, you know, so I'm much more competent in so many areas, but there's areas where I still am a bit hesitant, or I, you know, feel like, okay, I've showed up and I've, you know, spoken to the Board of Trade, and then I go home and I'm like, but do they really know that, like, I've got all these problems in my business? Of course they do. Of course they do. Everybody has this, but like everything, and you know, now when you have Instagram and, you know, post for the gram and all that, and the perfect outfits and the perfect lives, like, looking at yourself in the mirror can give you imposter syndrome if you think you've got to look this way and be this way and show up this way and be perfect all the time. Well, I can tell you that nobody is perfect all the time. Everybody has business challenges. If you are a business owner in Newfoundland and Labrador or anywhere, you know, you have business challenges, real ones, stuff that you don't want anybody really to know about. Like messy things that you should have done, you didn't. Like your accounting is in a mess, or, you know, you don't have any HR policies that you're supposed to have. Things that, you know, we all know we're supposed to do, and yet we didn't.
Our accounting's perfect, Anna.
Right,
I don't know.
yes, and HR policies and all that. I'm sure you got a book full of them, right? So, but what you should have and what you do have, like, they're never going to match up.
No.
And so, you know, but I tell you, COVID was really good for imposter syndrome for me. It actually made me get over a lot of it because right now we are all the same. Right now we are all afraid of the same couple of things, and our job is to look after each other. And I don't feel an imposter in that space. Like, if that's your job, you know. And so it really was a recommitment to who you are in mission and who, you know, what it is you want to do. And when you're true to that, it doesn't show up as much.
That's a great answer, and a great explanation, and really, you know, advice to people about it, because everybody suffers it. I'm certain of it. Everybody does, whether they admit it or not. It's gnawing at the back. Am I good enough to be here at this table? Am I the right person? Am I, you know? So thanks for the question, Jerry, and thanks for the answer. So Anne, you've come as far as you can see. What do you see next? What's over the horizon?
He's a good listener, isn't he?
Yes, he is a good listener. That's an excellent quality in a person, I have to say. What do I see next? Well, 2 things. Well, maybe 25 things, but 2 for now. The first is that, you know, internally in my organization, it's time for me to pass the torch a little bit. I see young, tremendous talent who will see further and are more capable at certain things than I am. And so I'm working hard on some succession planning and leadership development, and I want to be in the space that I can, you know, contribute the most to, and that's probably over here in taking what we've learned and working with a really young and dynamic team on some of the innovation stuff. And, you know, they got all the brains and I got the scars, you know, enough to say, oh, don't do that, you know, right? So I think I'm good there, and some of the, you know, where those service delivery organizations are going to go in the next 5 or 6 years or 10 years, you know, we have great ambitions around all of that are built on such a long legacy of that caring. And, you know, but I think other people will probably do some of that. So for me, you know, I've gotten involved in a few corporate boards, which has been, you know, here's an imposter syndrome statement for you. I think that I have gotten much more out of it than they may have gotten out of me, you know? Like, I've learned so much about how to think about business at, you know, the governance level and what the whole thing looks like as opposed to operating it, and that's been a tremendous learning experience for me. I started with Newfoundland Power and doing a couple of other things now, and you know, so that's part of my story, I guess. I think that the Seafair team, though, is at its infancy in terms of what we aspire to do in the spaces that we operate in, which are, you know, largely community care, but also in that small business SME space, you know, like our bookkeeping, payroll kind of services and all that stuff that I, you know, that's got a huge future in front of it if we stay on, you know, on mission there. But what I've been so fortunate to be able to do is surround myself with people who are willing to really reimagine how we look after each other in healthcare ways and in broader ways as well. And so you're going to see more technical solutions from us around some of that stuff, more partners that we're starting to work with, you know, to do some things. Like we have a software development partner that we're, you know, aligning with now, and a growth outside of Newfoundland and Labrador is first and foremost on our agenda. You know, one of the things that is more challenging when you do direct service delivery is how do you get out of the geographies you're in, and particularly when it's an island part that we're in. So that's a little bit of a heavier lift for us, and but we're working on it, and we've got some active business now in a couple of other provinces that is starting to take shape. So I think all of that will happen. For me, I'm hoping to take those good genes that I have and keep working. Like I'm not ready to go home now, and I have hobbies that I would love to pursue, but and public service might look different for me at some point. I might choose to do something else. I'm loving the work I'm doing with the Gathering Place. From time to time, I've toyed with the idea of becoming involved in politics. If it was what it used to be when they talked about it around my kitchen table, I would.
Right.
Yeah.
What it's become is not something that I have the temperament for.
That's a great explanation of politics for where we are today.
Yeah.
And every single answer that you've given us here today, and every time you expanded on something, this word keeps popping up, and I want you to expand on it for me. And that is, you keep saying the team, the team, the team. It's clear it's not all you, and you're the first to acknowledge it. Tell me what your team means to you.
Well, bring right back to the beginning of the conversation, it's my kitchen table craft. Really, I suppose, in lots of ways. Some of the people who are part of my executive team, I guess, I've worked with one of them was a child and youth care worker when we started off, he's here 19 years or something. He's not 40 yet. So other people are newer to the organization. But we have a group of people who are really aligned on core values. And everyone in this organization can tell you what our core values are. And we list them off, right? We talk about them regularly. And resilience, entrepreneurship, community, fun. Imagine having fun as one of your core values, but we do, right? And integrity, and all of those, and action. Actually, I had to put action in there because it's one thing to talk about is another thing to get her done.
Yeah.
And we all show up with that set of values around the table. Now I tell you, if you can get. And then that trickles out into how they lead the various parts of the organization that they all lead. If you can get people showing up with that set of values, many, many things are possible.
Right.
And that is a good room to walk into. So we have that meeting every week. And, I can honestly say there are days that I've loved my job and there's days that I've been really angry and upset about various things. But I have always been happy to see them and always grateful for that conversation every week. There's a trust and a level of shared mission that I'd go anywhere with them, and they guide me too. We call each other and we also speak. We encourage ourselves to have spicy meetings where we say. So that the disagreement doesn't happen, out there. It happens if you've got something to say, we're going to say it now. Yeah, right. And so we've learned to say that to each other. I'm not sure about that. Or, no. and we do, and we have that. And it's remarkable. And,
how does someone, if that's happening, it's always curious to me. I got involved in an environment where I had to say no a lot of times in a very large organization. And unfortunately, I don't want to be the no guy. I want to be the yes guy. But how do you get a culture where it's okay to say no?
That's really hard, and I've had to really work on that because yes, sure, I'll do that. Yes, sure, right? And you want people to be happy. Yeah. Saying yes all the time. So I think you learn that when you screw it up often enough. That's ideally there's a better way. That's how I learned it. Is okay, and no, that's not going to go well, right? And you get a bit more foresight. But that starts with trust. Yeah. So when all teamwork starts with trust and team selection. So you have to be prepared, even if someone is a great performer, if they don't share those core values, they can't be part of that team. No. And being part of the team. So we always talk about, you're always on two teams. The team you lead, if you're a VP or something in our, and the team you're on. And it's more important for you to do your hardest work with the team you're on, right? So, and I think me being part of, some corporate boards has helped me have a few teams that I'm on that have taught me about, what I need to learn, right? You learn it on the team you're on, not the team you lead. You take what you learn and you bring to the team you lead. So, but all of that starts with trust. So we do a lot of work on trust. And trust is about feeling comfortable sharing your vulnerabilities and sharing your good news and sharing your humanness. So we always start with good news, personal and professional.
I love that. That's huge.
We always do. And, these are habits you learn from things like the 7 Habits or some of those, the fast-growing companies kind of models and stuff. And we always, we know about each other's families because of all of that. Because personal good news is usually about your family or your kid or your something, that builds trust over time when you do that repeatedly. And we learned some phrases on how to challenge people without being, a jerk about it, right? And, to say, let's explore that another way. And we actively challenge ourselves to do that. And somebody sometimes plays the role of devil's advocate here so that you can do it in a way that's kind of safe. How to destroy trust is easy, right? Talk about people behind their back, say yes to their face and no behind their back and all that kind of stuff. That, you got to call that out when you see it too.
I listen to a podcast called Entree Leadership, and they have a no gossip policy.
Right.
They'll give you 2 strikes. The 3rd strike, you're out. Because if you're talking about people, you're talking negatively.
Right.
Most times.
Yeah, you're right. If they're not there,
no.
that's probably it.
And a fantastic vision of where you're going. And I will ask you this. You've been somebody who's had quite a journey. Clearly come from a wonderful foundation. But you've been around the block. You've been through some hard times. You've built businesses. You continue to build businesses. You're part of community, not only locally here at the Gathering Place, but you're part of our community by being on the Bank of Canada. You're impacting this country in many, many ways. What piece of advice might you give the audience here today?
Thinking about advice, is a little bit like medicine. And maybe I can, think about it as a shared experience that people could learn from, probably, because advice is what I think is going to work for you, and I don't really know you. So, I'll just challenge it to say what I've learned, and maybe that'll be helpful to somebody else.
Okay.
What I've learned is this, that the key to doing well in your life, in your relationships, and in your business, and your job, your kids, whatever, is to know yourself and not know what you need from others, because it has to be and this sounds really kind of esoteric, but as a person, I know that I need to be intellectually challenged. I know that I need people not to be too, I'm not organized, and I rigid structure does not work well for me, right? So I vote with, how my life has unfolded is I've known that about myself. I haven't, gone to a job that I wouldn't fit in and then been mad that I wasn't doing well at it. And, so really knowing yourself and knowing your path, and that means being honest that, maybe you're not going to be the next, billion-dollar startup because you're not wired for that. And that is okay, not more than okay. That is how you will be your best self and have your best life, is if you know yourself. So I guess you can call that advice, but that's what I've learned, is that knowing yourself is important, and feeling you're the author of your own journey is really important. So that sense it helps you develop self-efficacy and enough confidence to be able to swing your legs out over the bed in the morning and all that. So I think that's really important. And the other thing is, a bit of practical. So one of them is really kind of up there, and the other one is, really sort of practical. Show up. like, and I'm thinking about, young people who are just graduating. They've had a tough go for a few years with COVID and all that stuff, or who are just getting started in their careers, or kind of not as fully established, so they're still trying to find a path. And if you don't put yourself out in opportunity's way, you won't find it, right? Like, it's like people kind of wait for things to happen, or want to be more successful, or want to be more recognized, or whatever that is. But that does not happen to you. You make that happen, right? So you got to really kind of show up for those things. And I remember talking to a group at Enloe, and they asked me kind of a similar question. And I said, you got to go to those networking events. You got to do a whole pile of stuff that you don't really like. Right, or whatever. And now some people love going to that, but whatever it is, you kind of got to put your whole self into it. And putting your whole self into it is a little risky sometimes, and because it feels like, okay, well, what if it doesn't work? Then I've been an imposter, and you end up with all that. But the advice, really, I suppose, if you do want to put advice on it, is just live it to the fullest. Don't hold back.
That's good advice. Jerry, your thoughts?
Well, I told you I was excited about meeting you, Anne, and you didn't disappoint. I can
Thank
tell
you.
This has been a wonderful experience. I don't know all your core values, got a sense of them. The one that really strikes me is take action.
Yeah.
I think, Alan, in our lives, the things that have made us joy, this podcast itself, just do it. Just do it.
Exactly.
Get
Good for
moving.
you.
Get moving.
Right. It won't be perfect, but it'll be great.
Well, and I'll tell you this, even in reaching out to you, I'm like, am I worthy? Am I worthy to sit with someone who's on the Bank of Canada board? So that imposter syndrome crept in as I'm reaching out to you. But again, who cares? What's the worst you could have said? Too busy, Jerry can't do it. So I just think that you're providing an incredible thing for our province. Please don't rule out politics. I think there's definitely something that you could do to help. So just thanks, Anne, very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here.
Pleasure.
Well, another wonderful edition of GaleForceWins, and I can tell you that was a very inspirational conversation for me personally, and I know for Jerry as well, and I hope that our audience...
And all the good feels too, so thank you.
That's great, and this is truly your vision for your company, for your province, for this country is impressive. Your desire to get in there and not afraid to get your hands dirty in this stuff and do the work that's required, that's admirable. And thank you for that. And I, too, like to leave the podcast with my own piece of advice, and there's no doubt about it. The world needs more Anne Whelan. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It's been
wonderful.
Fantastic.
Thank you for tuning in to GaleForceWins. That's GaleForceWins, WINS.com.